So one of the most important things to learn when you start developing Android applications is how the different layouts and the units of measure work in Android. And this is particularly important when you're developing for multiple screen sizes. So I've just created a blank project here. I've just called it units, and I haven't done anything with this yet. And let's go into our main layout file. So if we go into the resources folder, into layout, we can see this main.xml file. So when I load this up, it's going to load it into the graphical editor here. Now we're going to be looking more at the different types of layout managers that are available. For right now, the default is a linear layout container. So if I click on the main.xml here to go to the source, we can see by default it gives me a linear layout with a text view inside. And the text view is exactly what it sounds like. It allows me to have some text visible in my application. So I'm going to go back to graphical layout, and I'm just going to select this, and I'm going to delete it, and I'm just going to drag in a button control or button widget. I'm going to drag that out. Now, one of the things that's required in Android when you're doing your UI is each element has to have, at the very least, layout width and layout height. So these two are required for any visual elements here. And there's a few different settings that we can put inside of here. So here we can see our linear layout has a layout width and height of fill parent, which means it's going to fill the entire screen. And then my button here, by default, it has a layout width and height of wrap content. And that basically means it's only going to take up as much space that it's required to take up. So if I go back to graphical layout, and I'm going to go into the properties view here. Now, if you don't have this here, you can go into Window, Show View, and then you want to actually go to Properties. Now, if it's not visible, you want to click on Other, and then if we come to the top here, under General, we can see this Properties view, and you want to click to show that. And this allows you to set properties on whatever is selected here in your layout. And there's also some helper buttons here that allow us to toggle the width and the height of various items. So if I select this button, one of the things I can do is to toggle fill width. And when I click that, this button now takes up the full width of its parent container. And I can do the same thing for height. Now, what does this actually look like in properties? So one of the things with this graphical layout editor here is it's a little bit buggy. So sometimes if you click on an item, it doesn't update it here in the properties panel. So to get it to update in the properties panel, we can just right click and do show in properties. And now we have our properties selected for the button. So if we look down at the bottom here, we can see under miscellaneous, we have our layout properties. And you can see for the height, it's actually set to match parent, which means it's going to take whatever the width and the height is of the parent container. So which is set to actually fill. Now this is a new property that was introduced in Gingerbread. Previous to this, we could actually choose fill parent and it would give us that same effect. So what if we want our button here to have a specific width and height? So the first thing that most people will do when they set out to do this is to actually put in a pixel value. So let's say we want it to be 200 pixels wide. Now, one of the things you might be tempted to do is just to put in 200 there, but we can't put in integer numbers. It actually expects a string. So if we wanted pixels, we could do 200px. And now you can see it's actually made the button 200 pixels high. And we can do the same thing for the width. If we come down here, let's say we also want to make it 200 pixels. So this is how a lot of people will approach things, is actually setting pixel values. Now, this is not the recommended approach when developing for Android because pixels are not equivalent on different devices based off of the DPI of the screen. A certain device might have so many pixels per inch, another device will have it differently. So things are not going to render properly across different devices. So the preferred unit to use is DP, and that actually stands for Device Independent Pixels. Now you can actually also put DIP or DP for short. Most people are using DP. And what this does is it gives you 200 device independent pixels. We have a chapter later on in this course on developing for multiple screen sizes where I go into this a little bit more. But just know that for any layout width and height, if you want to give a specific dimension, you should be using device-independent pixels like that. So this is for setting a specific width and the height of an element. But what about things like text size? So let's go ahead and just delete this button, and I'm going to bring out a text view here. And this is, again, just allows me to view some text. Let me get that showing in the Properties panel here. And if we come down, we can see we have a set of properties that deal with text. And here I can set things like the text size, text color, what the actual text is that's rendered inside of there. But let's focus on text size. So now I can provide a value in here using device-independent pixels. So I can say 50 dp, and it will give me a text size of 50 device-independent pixels. So this is going to render nice across different screens, but this doesn't take into account one very important thing, and that's the user's preference for how they want text displayed on their screen. Certain people with visual impairments need text that's larger so they can see it, and this particular unit of measure does not take that into account. For that, we have a special unit specifically for text called SP, which is scale-independent pixels. Now this works exactly like device-independent pixels, except that it also takes into account the user's specific preferences for text size. So again, the main thing to remember when we're talking about units and layout is that for the width and the height of items, you're going to want to use device-independent pixels, and that's going to be the way that kind of future-proofs you for users running your application on a whole host of different screen sizes. And then when it comes to using text into setting text size, you're going to want to use scale-independent pixels.